I heard my daughter-in-law whisper, "Get him declared incompetent by Christmas and the house is ours." By Thanksgiving I owned their mortgage, moved everything into my grandchildren's trust, and came back with a sheriff to unlock their door and say it plainly, I was foreclosing on my own son. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. The day that decision took root, October skies over our valley had the hard, clean blue you only get after a storm. I was 68 years old, all bone and tendon from a lifetime of turning drawings into buildings. My name is Walter. Everyone calls me Walt, except my late wife, Ruth, who called me by the full thing whenever she wanted my complete attention. In the 10 years since cancer took her, I have learned how to keep the lawn neat, the pipes from groaning, and the grief at a dull simmer instead of a boil. I am a builder by trade, a grandfather by nature, and a fool by habit, at least that is what I allowed my family to think. My son is Evan. He inherited his mother's dark eyes and my stubborn jaw. As a child he followed me to job sites and carried the small level in a canvas pouch on his belt. He used to fall asleep in the truck while I ran numbers on yellow pads, pencil tucked behind my ear, the radio whispering Dustin Lynch or the ballgame. Somewhere between 17 and 39 he stopped carrying the little level and started carrying other people's opinions. He married Sloane, perfect hair, perfect teeth, a voice that could draw blood without raising a decibel. I have tried to love her on my better days and to tolerate her on the others, for the sake of their 2 children, Caleb and Nora. Caleb is 12 and tall already, all elbows and longer thoughts than he lets on. Nora is 9, a flood of questions and freckles. They are the reason I put up with a great deal. They are the reason I had spent the last 8 years making the monthly mortgage payment on Evan and Sloane's house, because jobs were scarce after Evan's startup folded, because Sloane's salon never made what she promised me it would, because a grandfather would stand between a cold world and warm little hands, even if the adults in the room should have done that themselves. I was not supposed to hear their plan. The house had been full that Saturday for Nora's piano recital after-party. Sloane likes to stage things, cheese boards that end up as photographs, lemon slices pitched on top of seltzer glasses like yellow lace, precious little cards with scripted labels. When the guests drifted off and the dishwasher started its low animal hum, I stepped onto the back patio for air. The October evening was crisp and smelled faintly of the neighbor's wood stove. Their voices filtered from the kitchen window above the sink, thin but unmistakable. He leaves his checkbook all over the place, Sloane said, the way a person remarks on the weather. And that glassy stare he gets. It is getting worse. My cousin had her grandfather declared incompetent with less than that. That is extreme, Evan answered, but I could hear the calculation behind the protest. It is survival, she said. The equity in this house alone would clear the cards and give us space. We file for temporary guardianship, get power of attorney, and when he feels cornered, he will stop coming around. The bank does not need to know anything except that we are consolidating his assets for his care. Her voice moved closer to the window, she was rinsing. By Christmas, we can have him placed. Rose Maples seems fine. People play bingo. He will make friends. He is my father, Evan said, and for a moment I recognized the boy who once fell asleep with his head in my lap, a half-built model airplane on the coffee table. And you are my husband, she replied, crisp as a file, and our children deserve parents who are not living at the mercy of your father's moods and handouts. We have given him years of holidays and deference. It is time to take control. The dishwasher's hum swallowed the rest, but I had heard enough to redraw the entire structure of my life. I drove home in silence. The old Ford has a smell my wife could always identify: cedar, graphite, coffee. The hands that can still plumb a wall lean true were steady on the wheel. Above the dash, the sky was a hard dark, first bright star over the grain elevator. I did not cry. Not because the situation did not deserve tears, but because I learned long ago there are things bigger than tears. If you want a house to stand, you do not weep on the foundation, you correct the rebar, you excavate to solid ground, you pour anew. At the kitchen table I pulled the 3 binders I keep for such occasions. Ruth used to tease me that I filed my feelings with my receipts. She was not wrong. Binder 1, Mortgages and Liens. Binder 2, Insurance and Titles. Binder 3, the hand-drawn maps of my future that I thought nobody ever looked at, not even me. I clicked on the old brass desk lamp, the one that makes a circle of warm light as if to say, within this radius you can shape what is trying to shape you. Step 1, Stop the quiet hemorrhage. The next bank day I went to Lincoln Savings right when the doors opened. The manager, Pamela, is a woman who knows 3 things for sure: numbers, truth, and how many grandchildren I have because I have bored her with their stories too often. I spoke softly and plainly. The mortgage on 18, Wren Street had been paid through my account on the 1st of every month for 8 years. I asked what the principal looked like. I asked what it would take to buy the note, not just pay it, a full purchase. Pamela blinked. Then she nodded slowly. You want to become the note holder, she said. We do not advertise that option, but it exists. I want to be the bank, I said. It seems the only way to teach my son the concept of cost. She did not scold me or counsel me. She printed, highlighted, tapped where I should sign. I wrote a cashier's check that made my stomach swoop the way it does when the roofers are pushing bundles too close to the edge. I called my lawyer on the way to my truck. Maya Chen has been my counsel for 25 years. She is the kind of woman who can pin a number to the wall from 30 paces, the kind of attorney who will not let you humiliate yourself even if you insist. Her first words were not hello but, you sound like someone who has had a long night. I was educated, I said. By whom? By my son's wife. What do we need, she said, and the air shifted, as if someone had opened a door and let in a new weather. We need a trust that names my grandchildren as primary beneficiaries, I said. Irrevocable. We need to move my home, my retirement accounts, the cabin, and whatever liquid funds are still mine under that umbrella. We also need a medical evaluation that proves my faculties are sound, with language in the file that would make a judge embarrassed to question it. Walter, she said, softer, do you want to talk about what happened? Yes, I said. But later. For now, build the scaffolding. Done. By Wednesday, the Blue Door Trust existed. I named it after the door Ruth painted the summer the peaches were so sweet they dripped down everyone's wrists. The color is a slightly ridiculous bright, more Greek island than Midwestern farm, but it was the last project we completed together, and whenever I look at that door, I hear her humming. We placed my assets inside the trust with the quiet efficiency of a good crew moving a grand piano, no strain, no bragging, just careful grips and clear commands. I sat with Dr. Abbott on Friday for 3 hours of questions and memory games that felt like a bingo night and a root canal, then walked out with a printed letter that should be framed for its elegant ferocity. In my professional opinion, it read, Walter James Merrick demonstrates full cognitive competence. I cancelled what had always been invisible to everyone but my checking account. The utilities I had set to auto-pay for Evans Place. The emergency credit card that had been used for groceries at places that do not sell groceries. The tuition transfer for Nora's piano teacher that I did not mind paying, but would no longer do in the dark. It is a remarkable thing, the way the body steadies when it stops bleeding. The headache I had carried without noticing for 8 years lifted like fog. I prepared, too, for the uglier part of the plan, to let their greed run until it tripped itself. In a carpenter's world, you trust the level. In a lawyer's world, you trust documentation. So I listened and gathered, phone calls routed through speaker on purpose, conversations at my door recorded, not by deceit but by self-preservation, in a state where one person's consent is lawful and mine was enough. I did not snoop. They spoke freely. The second Saturday in October, Sloane called with a tone she saves for waiters and cable company representatives. "We need you to come over, Walt," she said. "What is the trouble?" I asked. "Nothing is wrong. We just need to go over some paperwork. You know how it is with Medicare and the house and all that. It is boring stuff." "I am not yet on Medicare," I said. Silence. Then a bright laugh. "That is what I meant." I drove over with a small leather folder and a pen I save for signatures that matter. Their living room had been staged the way a person stages a crime scene they hope will look like a dinner. Flowers. Candles. Papers fanned across the coffee table like a hand of cards. "These are forms to make things easier for you," Sloane said. "So you do not have to worry about bills. Temporary power of attorney for healthcare decisions, in case you have another episode. We can guide things. Evan will sign, of course." "I have not had a first episode," I said, and set Dr. Abbott's letter beside the forms. She looked down and smiled without any of it meeting her eyes. "Doctors are overly cautious," she said. "We are not trying to take anything. We want to make sure you do not accidentally give away your life with one of your lapses." "Have I lapsed?" She sat back. "You leave checks around. You forget to pay things sometimes. We have picked up the slack out of love." Evan said nothing. He sat there on the edge of his own couch like a guest. Caleb's face was a pale moon peeking around the stairwell. Nora's piano books were stacked in the basket where the remote controls should have been. I looked at my son. "You can read these to me," I said. "If you think they are wise." He flinched. He has never been good at lying with paper in front of him. He looked at the first page, at the third, and his eyes skittered like minnows from the parts that mattered. "Dad, it is just to help," he said finally. Sloane is scared. "Of what?" I asked. "Of me managing my own life with the competence I have used to manage it for 68 years. Sloane's smile thinned to a line. "You are living in the past," she said. "Pride is not a plan." "No," I said. "It is not." I slid the leather folder from my jacket and placed the Blue Door Trust summary on the table. The page looked very small under the chandelier's glow. "This is my plan," I said. "It makes your plan unnecessary." Sloane picked up the page as if it might have oil on it. She read. She waved it in the air once, an involuntary small motion like a person fanning herself at a funeral, then set it down. "Irrevo, how do you pronounce this?" she asked. "Irrevocable," I said. "It means what it sounds like." She blinked. Something quick and mean flickered in her eyes, like a fish showing its flank. "Congratulations," she said. "You have cut us out of your life." "No," I said, and my voice did something I did not expect, it gentled. "I have cut you out of the part where you could harm mine." She stood up so fast the papers skittered. "Evan," she said. "Please ask your father to leave. We will revisit this later. I left without touching her forms. On the porch, Caleb slid his hand into mine for a heartbeat, then let go, as if I were a hot pan he must not be caught holding. 2 days later the first volley came. A visit from Adult Protective Services. The worker, a man named John with kind eyes and a clipboard, stood on my stoop and explained that an anonymous report had been filed. There was concern about my ability to manage my finances. There were allegations of unsafe living conditions. "You are welcome to come in," I said, and swung the blue door open wide. "Just wipe your boots. The finish is new." He walked through my house. He took in the labeled folders and clean sink. He watched me set coffee to percolate and fold a laundry load that had just clicked dry. He asked me to open the refrigerator, which I did. He looked at the photos lined on the mantel, my wife in that ridiculous purple hat, the grandkids at the beach with sand stuck to their shins. He asked if I had anyone to call if I needed help. "I do," I said. "Though most of the time I am the person everyone else calls." He smiled and said he understood. Before he left, I handed him a sealed envelope addressed to his supervisor, containing Dr. Abbott's letter. No hard feelings, no drama. I saw the moment he understood he had been weaponized by somebody else's panic. "If another report comes," he said in the tone of someone stepping carefully across ice, "you have my card." It did not end there. My truck tires were slashed one morning like a neat red signature across black. The piano teacher texted that her check had not arrived and that perhaps we needed to speak about who was really responsible for payments. A feed store bill I had not made arrived at my house, with my name spelled correctly and the account number unfamiliar. I did not accuse. I documented. Maya's paralegal, Ruthie, a name I could not say without my chest clenching, logged each moment with the precision of a surgeon. We spoke quietly of police and prosecutors. I asked for patience. "Let it ripen," I said, in the way my wife used to coach peaches in the window. The mortgage transfer took 12 business days. In that span I made 3 Sunday dinners and left Tupperware with Sloane's favorite lemon chicken on their porch because I am petty like that and because there is a part of me that cannot stop feeding people even as they bite the hand. In that span, Evan called once to ask whether I could take Caleb to baseball practice on Wednesdays again. I said of course. Sloane sent me a text the next morning that said, "Please stop trying to confuse my children." I looked at the unopened message for a long time, then went outside and raked the leaves in methodical arcs until I could breathe. The letter from Lincoln Savings arrived finally, thick with enclosure. I sat at my desk and read it twice. The language was precise and cold, the way legal language must be. The note had been purchased by Walter James Merrick, custodian, Blue Door Trust. A separate document spelled out the repayment schedule. Another explained the conditions under which a default would trigger a trustee sale. The math was merciless, not by my design, but because math in the end does not care about your story. I did not want to be cruel. I wanted to create a pressure that would force a revelation. Either Evan would step into the man he was meant to be, or he would step out of my house and stop punishing his children for it. I drafted a simple letter. No threats. No flourish. Dear Evan, it began. Beginning with the next payment cycle, please remit your mortgage payment to the attached address. Please call me. We will make a plan that suits your current reality. I wrote the last sentence twice before I let it stand. This is not punishment, this is a boundary. I hand-delivered the letter and placed it under their steel heron paperweight. The heron looked annoyed at the task. They did not call. The first missed payment clicked like a switch inside a panel. A month later I sent a reminder that was met with silence. At 60 days, the note allowed for a notice of default to be recorded. I waited until day 65 because I could not help hoping my son would arrive at my door breathless, apologetic, righteous with a plan. He did not. A third month slipped by. Property taxes came due. Insurance flagged a lapse because Sloane had switched carriers and not told anyone except the Instagram followers who applauded her for choosing a better brand. I paid the taxes to protect the asset that would be my grandchildren's one day whether anyone liked it or not. I reinstated the insurance and sent the binder to Maya's office. The structure was holding. I was simply removing rotted sections and replacing them with sound wood, the way you would with a porch that has been asked to hold too much weight for too long. It was around then that Caleb knocked on my door on a Wednesday when he should have been at practice. He stood there in the blue dusk, his glove hanging from 2 fingers. "Mom said you could not pick me up anymore," he said. "She said you were unpredictable. But she went out. Dad is asleep." "Get in," I said. "We will be late." He climbed into the passenger seat like he had done it 1,000 times, because he had. We drove in the kind of silence that is not cold at all, but simply shared air. Halfway to the field he said, "Grandpa, is it true you are going to move away?" "Who said that?" I asked. "Mom told Nora that the old men's building smells like soup and that you will be fine." The steering wheel was smooth and cool under my palms. "I am not moving anywhere I do not choose," I said. "And I choose to be where you and your sister can find me without maps." He nodded, small, and turned his face to the window to watch the corn stalks pitch in the wind like a field of men bowing. On the day the trustee sale was scheduled, public, legal, plain as winter, we had already had the other kind of battle too. A family dinner where Sloane raised her glass and toasted, to clarity, and I put my napkin to the side and answered her in the language she understands best, numbers. 15 years, I said. 15 years of checks with your mortgage company's name. 7 years of vehicles repaired on my dime. 4 years of private school tuition I thought we all agreed was for the children's good. 2 Thanksgiving flights for your parents I paid for because Evan could not cover the tickets. 8 emergencies that began with, just this once, and learned to repeat themselves. I say this not to humiliate you but to make visible the invisible work someone has been doing so you can live the reality you photograph. Sloane looked at me down the length of her lashes like I was a stain on a carpet. "You are very proud of your charity," she said. "No," I said. "I am weary of lies." Evan stood so fast his chair skidded back. "Enough," he said. It came out like something he did not know he had stored. His face was flushed. His fists opened and closed. He looked like a man on the verge of choosing. "Son," I said softly. "I will always stand between you and the wind. But I will not stand between you and your own decisions. I used to. That was my mistake." "Your mistake," Sloane repeated, as if testing the shape of the words. "You think our lives are your project." "I think my grandchildren deserve safety," I said. "Do not weaponize those children against me," she said, sharp. "They are my children." "They are also mine," I said, and it was then that I saw something I had not allowed myself to name, the proof that love can blind you to patterns you would advise a stranger to run from. It is easy to call a woman hateful in a story. It is harder to acknowledge the ways a family culture feeds her, rewards her, defers to her because the alternative would require the men to change. When the auctioneer read the property details weeks later, the gray clapboard, the lot size, the parcel number that means nothing until it means where your daughter lives, there were 5 strangers on the courthouse steps, 3 regulars who buy distress like groceries, and me. Someone said my name and then said, "Is that not his own son's place?" I ignored it. The law did what it does. The minimum bid was set. One of the men lifted his chin. Another studied his phone. I bid once. When it was done, the auctioneer looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and pity, as if he wanted to invite me for coffee and ask what broke in me that I would do something like this. Nothing had broken. I was keeping a promise I made to a woman with paint on her hands that our grandchildren would not be at the mercy of anyone's pride, including mine. The notice for a sheriff's civil standby was posted 2 days after. Maya insisted. "Emotions make people foolish," she said, and my goal was not to create a scene but to perform a transfer with dignity. The deputy assigned was a woman named Cortez with a braid down her back thick as rope. "My grandmother raised me," she said when we stepped onto the porch at 18 Ren. "I get it." I inserted my old key and turned it. The lock yielded, a tiny surrender. Sloane was in the hallway wearing a sweatshirt with a college name on it she did not attend. Evan stood behind her, colorless. "You cannot be here," Sloane said, voice low and bright. "I can," I said. "But only for 30 minutes. Deputy Cortez spoke gently. "Ma'am, we are here to keep the peace while Mr. Merrick retrieves any property he owns and posts the transfer notice he is legally required to post. There will be no disruption." "What is this lunacy?" Sloane demanded, turning to Evan. "Evan, say something." Evan looked at the floor like it might tell him where to stand. "Is this necessary?" he asked me, and I could hear what he meant. "Do we have to put our story on paper for everyone to see?" "Yes," I said. "It is." I moved quickly, not unkindly. I took the framed photograph of Ruth and me from the mantel and the small cedar box where I keep letters that carry the weight of a lifetime. I put 2 porcelain birds in a bag for Nora because she covets them and I will give them to her when she is older. I posted the notice by the door with blue painter's tape because I could not bring myself to mar their paint with anything more permanent. Sloane followed me from room to room articulating her anger like beads on a rosary. "You did this on purpose," she said. "You wanted us dependent so you could play savior. You think this will make us crawl?" "No," I said, and I turned to face her finally. "I think this will make you choose. There is a difference." Evan moved to stand between us because he is polite even in crisis. Deputy Cortez checked her watch. 10 minutes, she said softly. Nora appeared at the top of the stairs with her hair in its morning braid half out, making her look like a small wild thing peeking from a hedge. Caleb stood behind her, shoulders set. He knew enough to be careful. Children in these moments become surveyors of adults for fault lines. Their eyes are tools, not weapons, and they mark the cracks. "You cannot take their home," Sloane said. She was crying now, which softened her in a way that made me ache with the wish that we could have arrived at kindness years ago. "It is not their home," I said. "It is the house I have allowed you to live in without conditions for 8 years. It is now an asset owned by a trust that exists for their benefit. They will always have a place to sleep. Whether that is here depends on your choices. You may rent. You may buy it back. You may walk away and find something you made with your own hands. But you will not lie to me and call it love and ask me to carry you while you kick the legs out from under me." "Get out," she said, and the words were a whisper and a scream. "I will," I said, "when the time is up." In the end, Evan took my letter with terms like a man receiving a diagnosis. Sloane tore her copy down the center, then again until it was confetti. Deputy Cortez swept it with her boot to the side. When I left, Caleb followed me out to the porch. "Grandpa," he said, voice low, "are we in trouble?" "You are not in trouble," I said. "You are in a story. That is different. It is my job to write this chapter so it does not hurt you." He nodded. He understood that books have bad parts that make sense later. That night the phone calls arrived like a summer storm, fast and loud. Sloane's mother left a message that contained words she would never use with her priest. Evan's brother, who had always observed my generosity with the eyes of a raccoon near a trash can, called to say I should be ashamed. My sister, who lives in Oregon and thinks I am still 35, left a quiet message that said only, "I trust you. Do what you must." I turned off the ringer. I made tea. I walked the yard in loops until the white tails at the edge of the woods appeared, then vanished again. The next morning, I did the thing any decent grandparent would do after detonating the center of the family. I made waffles. I delivered them to school wrapped in foil with a note for the office. "Please make sure Nora and Caleb get these at lunch if it will not cause trouble," I wrote. "It is their favorite. The syrup is in a separate container." It was a ridiculous gesture and exactly the thing to do. Caring is 1,000 small antidotes after a medicine that burns. There were court dates in the following weeks. Maya handled them with grace and a surgical steel kind of voice. Sloane had filed a petition to limit my access to the children for their safety, citing my erratic behavior. We filed a motion with Dr. Abbott's letter and a thick stack of bank documents that showed every payment I had made and every strange charge I had discovered in dim greeting. A judge with a clock on his bench decorated with a tiny sailboat listened and then asked Sloane one question, so softly she did not hear the trap beneath. "In your opinion," he asked, "what would the safest version of Walter look like in your life?" She said, without pausing, "He would sign over decision-making and stop interfering with our finances." "Not," he said, repeating her words like a teacher who has found a mistake, "not he would choose to remove himself when he is tired, not he would call before he arrived, not he would receive boundaries kindly. He would sign over and stop." He turned to me. "Mr. Merrick, do you have anything to add?" "Yes," I said. "We are not having the same conversation. I am speaking about the care of 2 children. She is speaking about access to my accounts. I will talk with anyone about the first. The second is ended." Evan came to my porch 2 days later in the cold hour when the sky is light but the sun has not quite cleared the trees. He stood there like a freshman on his first day at a job site, not sure where to put his hands. "I hate you," he said, and his voice broke a little. "And I am grateful." "Both can be true," I said, and stepped to one side to let him in. He did not step in. He kept his feet on my mat as if it were a dock and the house a lake he might drown in. His eyes were rimmed red. "She is leaving," he said. "She said she would not live under your shadow another day. She said I had one chance to convince you to reverse this, or she takes the kids and moves to her mother's." "That is not a chance," I said. "That is a hostage note." He laughed once, a sound like bark. "I messed up," he said finally. The words fell from his mouth heavy as wet lumber. His shoulders sagged, unburdened and newly aware of their own work. "I let her make decisions when I should have made them. I let you fix things because it felt like love and because I was tired. I love my children and I have been the kind of man who loves them quietly in the corners instead of loudly in the middle of the room where it counts. Can I rent the house?" "Yes," I said. "At a rate that will not break you, with legal boundaries that will save you from yourself." One missed payment sends us to Plan B. You will attend the financial literacy course Maya's firm runs for clients who keep landing in this same mud. You will speak to a counselor about why you apologize instead of decide. You will keep your anger out of rooms with your children in them. And you will put a lock on the bulk snacks because your son eats like a horse. He laughed and scrubbed his face with his hands. She will never agree. She does not need to, I said. You do. He nodded once, the kind of nod a man gives when he finally understands that changing his life will feel like lifting something too heavy every morning until it does not. Sloane left before Thanksgiving with 2 suitcases and 3 sets of instructions shouted from the driveway over her shoulder. The farewell was not cinematic. There was no apology, no final cruel line. She stood by the trunk of a friend's car and did what she had always done, sorted people into columns labeled asset and liability. She put me in the second one. She put Evan in both. She kissed Nora and Caleb too hard and whispered things that sounded like love but tasted like ashes. I stood in the kitchen and peeled potatoes. You can do 2 things at once. You can hold a child's head while she cries and remember the first house you bought with your wife. You can be the villain in one story and the scaffold in another and still wash the dishes after. We ate turkey at my place. The blue door looked especially ridiculous against the skeletal trees. Caleb improvised grace because Ruth used to do it and we are all trying to fill spaces without admitting the holes. He said, "Thank you for food and for people who make hard choices even when it hurts and for Grandpa who makes waffles." It was a child's prayer and more generous than I deserved. December was a long, cold hallway with doors all down it. Some we opened easily, new routines, homework at my table, baseball equipment reorganized in the garage by a boy who likes order when the world is chaotic. Some doors we stood at with our foreheads pressed to the wood, Nora asking whether love always leaves, Evan learning how to cook ground beef without burning it, me learning how to keep my mouth shut when it would feel so good to say I told you this road had a cliff. In January the court granted a temporary residential schedule that gave me every Wednesday and every other weekend and allowed me to make decisions for the children when they were in my care. It was not custody. It was not a triumph. It was a structure that kept the roof on the house while we replaced the beams. Sloane contested it, then missed the hearing because she said she had a hair show that could change her life. The judge noted it. He did not gloat. Neither did I. Spring came the way it does in our county, all at once with the smell of soil rising and roofers swarming like ants on houses that had survived winter but needed kindness. I hired Evan for a crew I trust. I did not do it because I felt sorry for him. I did it because he is good when he is forced to stand upright. The foreman, a woman named Lil who does not tolerate nonsense, gave me a long look and said, "If he shows up late, I will fire him and then I will come to your house and fire you also." It was perfect. He showed up early. Caleb pitched in the championship in June. He threw a curve that surprised even him and then stood on the mound like a boy who had learned he could make a ball move just by believing in physics. Nora played a piece at recital that made 3 mothers cry and 1 father stand up like he had been lifted by the music. After, she ran to me first, not out of disloyalty but because she knows I will listen to every note again when she plays it in the living room and will not check my phone once. Sloane called in July and said she wanted to come to the 4th cookout at my place and that she would bring her famous kale salad. I told her she could come and that she should bring a dish, but that there were rules written on a yellow pad on the entry table. She laughed and said, "I think I am a king." I said I think I am a man who mows his own lawn and pays his own bills. She arrived with a salad that tasted like regret and complimented the blue door and asked with an arch if I had painted it myself. I said no, Once upon a time a woman with paint in her hair did. She looked at me like I was speaking Greek, then turned to chat with the only neighbor who still tells her she is luminous. In August, with the house paid a year in advance by a son who had never paid a thing early in his life, I sat at the kitchen table with Maya and signed the last of the trust documents that would carry my legacy whether I lived to 90 or dropped tomorrow in the garden among the tomatoes. Caleb and Nora will not inherit cash that makes wolves gather, they will inherit structures. College funds that release based on attendance and sober living. Housing that cannot be mortgaged without 2 signatures and a phone call to a woman named Lil who will ask them questions other people are too polite to ask. My cabin will never be sold, it will be shared on a schedule that includes opening weekend of deer, 2 long weekends in summer, and 1 quiet winter week for anyone who wants to sit by a fire and listen to a life burn down to embers and then warm itself again from those same coals. I am not a hero. Heroes do not take their own children's houses. I am a man who learned late that boundaries are love in a different grammar. When I lie awake some nights and the ceiling looks like paper where a blueprint has bled through, I think of all the ways this could have gone. I could have let them succeed in their scheme and everyone would have called me kind for smiling at bingo. I could have blown everything up without a plan and everyone would have called me petty for years. Instead, I chose the most boring word spoken in the most boring tone in the history of families and finances, structure. A year to the day from the auction on the courthouse steps, I stood at the back of the school auditorium while Nora played Debussy with a seriousness that made my eyes burn in a way I would never admit to anyone. Sloane was in the 3rd row wearing a dress that declared she was doing just fine. She clapped on the beat and looked at her phone twice. Evan stood beside me in the shadows because he still believes his presence bangs like a drum in rooms where the children need violins. When the piece ended, the audience rose like wheat in wind. Nora bowed, small and solemn. She scanned the room and found me. She smiled so wide her face changed. After the program, in the chaos of flowers and program booklets and everyone speaking at once, she threaded through the hips and elbows and tripped over a boy's backpack and collided with me. I steadied her. She looked up, cheeks flushed. "Grandpa," she said. I felt strong. "You were," I said. "You are." We walked out under a sky that had the heavy, warm feeling of a July evening that will not cool. Caleb ran to catch up, his backpack tapping his shoulder. Evan followed, slow as a man who has learned not to demand to be seen. Sloane walked to the parking lot with a woman I do not know. She looked back once, then did not. When we reached the truck, Caleb touched the edge of the bed the way boys do when they are about to say something they think may change their lives. "Mom says someday you will regret what you did," he said, blunt in the way honesty is not kind so much as clean. He looked at me with that wary, hopeful expression that children wear when they hand you a truth that has cut them. I looked at my grandchildren, who were my future standing on 2 sets of skinny legs, and at my son, who was my past and my penance and my hope in a pair of tired boots. "I regret that I did not do it sooner," I said. "I regret that I allowed people I loved to think that love was the same as money. I regret that your grandmother did not live to tell me to put my foot down. And I do not regret one other thing." "What is that?" Nora asked. "That I built this family the way I build houses," I said. So when a storm came, the roof did not leave. They were quiet for a moment. Then Caleb said, "Can we get ice cream?" which is the right question at the end of a long story. We drove to the place with the neon sign that always flickers on the last letter. The girl behind the counter smiled and called me Mr. Merrick because in a small town it is polite to use a person's name, even if you are 16 and he is a rumor that your mother and her friends talk about over coffee. I ordered vanilla for Nora and chocolate for Caleb and coffee for me because my wife used to say coffee ice cream tastes like an adult trying to behave, and I liked the joke. Evan ordered nothing and took a bite of everyone's. The sun dropped behind the water tower. The air took on that bruised purple that always makes me think of Ruth's ridiculous hat. On the way home, somewhere between the ice cream place and the turnoff where the oak leans toward the road as if trying to hear what is said in cars at night, my phone buzzed. A number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Later, at my table, I played it with the volume low. "Walter, this is John from Adult Protective," the voice said, careful and kind. "I just wanted to say I am closing the file. And if you ever want to come talk to my training class about how family systems weaponize us, I would appreciate it. Also, my mother makes a blue door on every picture she paints, because her grandmother had one. I thought you would like that." I smiled into a room that held so many ghosts it felt crowded sometimes. Before bed, I opened the cedar box and read one of Ruth's letters, because there are nights when you need someone who knew you when you were just a man with a pencil behind his ear and a prescription for ibuprofen and a faith that if you get the measurements right, you can make something that stands longer than you do. The letter was the one she wrote when Evan was born. "You will be a good father because you will make a small life large with structure and laughter," she had written. "You will give him boundaries so wide they will feel like freedom until the day he meets a woman who thinks your boundaries are bars. Then you will need to be both stronger and kinder than you thought, in the way of men who work with their hands and their hearts. Remember, the point of the house is not to admire the roof. The point is to keep the children dry." I put the letter away. I turned off the lamp. The house breathed. Outside, a fox moved through the yard with its secular, hungry grace. Somewhere in town, my daughter-in-law probably composed a speech about betrayal that would make strangers give her the soft eyes that let people remain as they are. In my house, in my bed, in my absurd kitchen with its blue door and its bowl of peaches on the windowsill because I keep hoping someone will bring me fruit from a tree one more time, I slept without dream or reason. It is a hard thing to say out loud, and harder still to do, but I will say it, and I did it. I did not save my son from consequence. I saved my grandchildren from chaos. I did not rescue a woman from herself. I removed my money from the place where her worst impulses live. I did not win anything. I enforced gravity, and gravity is not a victory, it is a law. If you are reading this for a satisfying snap at the end, there was one, I suppose, though it made less noise than the internet prefers. It happened on a Sunday when the sky was a generous gray and the birds were louder than usual. Evan stood at my stove flipping pancakes. Caleb sat at the table solving something with too many excess. Nora practiced quietly at the keyboard with the fake wood cabinet, notes like rain. The door opened without knocking. Sloane walked in, a ghost with a beautiful haircut. "Do not," Evan said, without raising his voice or his eyes from the skillet, "begin." She stood there, hand on her purse strap, and something in her face went very still. A column had been moved in the structure she had counted on, and the ceiling did not fall. "Fine," she said, not unkindly. She looked at the children. "I will be at the park at 3. "We have a game at 3, Caleb said without looking up. "Then I will be at the park at 5, she said. She walked to the blue door. She paused with her hand on the knob. She looked back like a woman at the threshold of a house she has finally understood is not hers. "Your taste in doors was always ridiculous," she said to me, and this time there was almost laughter in it. "Your taste in men was not much better," I said, and she snorted because sometimes even a woman like Sloane can be honest for a second. When she left, Evan flipped a pancake with a small flourish I recognized from when he was 8 and had just learned to make something he could eat without asking anyone's permission. He looked at me with a question in his eyes that he did not know how to shape. "It will hold," I said. "The house. The plan. You." He nodded. Outside, a small gust shook the maple and sent a scatter of leaves across the yard like children running. When people ask me if I regret foreclosing on my own son, I tell them the truth in the only grammar that ever made sense to me: the beam had rotted. I replaced it before the roof fell on the children. And then I handed the house to them, along with a tool belt, and said, "Here. Build."
Greetings, and thanks for spending your time with us today. I truly hope you enjoyed the video. I want to wish you a peaceful day or a restful evening, wherever you may be. Take care, and we'll see you next time.